seconds. I'm not okay. This hangout on air is live. Welcome to TINT, the premier free culture sports podcast. We might be changing the name. I don't want to talk about that too much because A, that's probably boring for people, and B, we have a lot to cover per usual. That is just sort of the state of affairs when you only do a show every 2 weeks, and there
Only
is
for
a lot of yeah.
only for 20 minutes too. So
Yeah, exactly. I am wearing this hat today to remind me that actually this time we are not going to be doing a show every 2 weeks. We are going to be doing a show on Wednesday. That is not up on the YouTube page yet. I need to make that happen. But Wednesday at 4:30 Eastern, we will be discussing the NCAA men's tournament brackets. I suppose we could talk some women's too if we wanted to do that. We have not discussed talking women's, so we'll have to think about our gender.
We have not, but we can give them some honorable mentions.
Yeah. I also wanted to mention opening up that we are going to be doing a crowdfunding campaign. That's probably going to happen soon. We haven't set a date yet, but maybe in April that'll be happening. So stay tuned so you can look at the exciting things that are coming up on the crowdfunding. And the first news thing that I wanted to mention before we jump into the EPL stuff. I don't know if you saw this, but the political website 538, they are going to be turning into a sports site. I wondered if you had any thoughts on that or if you had seen that. It seems, I understand the move, but it just seems kind of strange to me.
I mean, I don't know much about 538. I was trying to look into it, and it did look heavily political. So to see that it joining the sports ranks, I wasn't sure if that meant that they were dropping all politics or if it was focusing on sports politics.
That's an interesting question. I don't think it's sports politics. They could be doing both. I think they're just doing sports, but I could be wrong about that. So let's jump into some EPL here to get started. I wanted to go over our fantasy league. I haven't paid a lot of attention to the fantasy league. In fact, I paid so little attention to our fantasy league that when ESPN does this thing where mid-season they get rid of all of your team, I kind of understand why they do it because there's a transfer market in mid-September. But I feel like you should be able to keep your old players if you want. That's the way the MLS does it, or at least that's the way it looks like. You have unlimited transfers during the World Cup because, like, basically most of the teams have buys. There's actually, I think, I'm not looking at it right now, but I think Dallas has a game during the World Cup. So, like, you need, like, all Dallas players that week. I don't know if they're going to allow you more than 4, but anyway, we can talk about that later. But I thought if you wanted to jump back into the EPL stuff at some point, we could just do a week-by-week talk of who's winning on each week. Now, we don't have a lot to talk about this week, and we probably won't. It'll always be the previous week when we're doing the shows on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
But there is one game going on in the EPL right now, and that is Hull City versus Manchester City, or the Hull City Tigers, or whatever they're called now. And Company was sent off in the 12th minute, but in the 14th minute, David Silva scored a goal. So
is that still the only goal?
That is the only goal, at least according to ESPN FC. That is 1-0 in the 62nd minute. So, and possession is 50-50. I guess City showing that they can beat Hull with 10 people instead of 11. So. The rest of the games are either taking place tomorrow or they're taking place at 11 or 1:30 Eastern Time. So we're not going to talk about those unless you have anything specific to say, basically because by the time anybody hears this, they'll have been started almost certainly. Mm-hmm. Do you have anything to say about the games that are happening today?
Well, there's not much happening today unless you're very concerned with the relegation battle. The only team that's in the top other than Man City who's currently playing is Chelsea at 1:30. They're playing Aston Villa, so they should pull out a win there, even though it is at Villa Park. I guess the game of the week is really Liverpool at Man U, which is tomorrow. People were riding Man U off, but they look like they've kind of rebounded and found their form, so who knows
how they won one game.
Okay, that's rebounding and finding your form to some people.
I mean, they looked. I mean, I didn't see the game, but everything that I saw in the commentary was that they looked terrible when they were in Greece, and then I mean, yeah, they won against Cardiff City, I guess. But I mean, they didn't look good against Cardiff City. That's a game that I actually saw. Now, apparently, everybody except RVP looked fine against West Brom. But RVP has come out and said that he's happy at United, and the thing about RVP is there's always been a little bit of a petulant streak in him, and I think that's good to a certain extent that he gets like riled up. He doesn't like losing. I mean that's not a bad thing. I mean if all the players looked super happy for being in 7th place, you would be probably more concerned. But he's out there kicking people because he wants to win. And some people are thinking that's frustration. Now, maybe this is just a PR thing to get him through the end of the season. Who knows? A lot of things get said in the world that aren't true. But he made some pretty strong statements, even saying that he'd be willing to stay longer than his 4-year contract. So I don't know, honestly, if United will want him at the end of his 4-year contract, because I think he'll be, on the wrong side of 30 and, getting older every day, as we do. But that's a story for another day. So Liverpool currently sitting in 2nd, but they're 7 points. Chelsea's 7 points clear of Liverpool. So, and I misspoke. United is not in 7th. They are in 6th based on goal differential, and they are tied on points with Everton, and Everton has a game in hand. So. But still, 6th is not really where you want to be.
Not for teams like Man U.
No, yeah. Maybe Southampton would like to be in 6th. I'm not even sure that. I mean, Newcastle seems to have been pretty clear that they don't want to be in a Europa League spot. 6th may well end up being a Europa League spot. I mean, it's hard to know for certain. Only 5th is for certain a Europa League spot, depending on what happens in the League Cup. Well, I guess we know that 6th will be a Europa League spot as well, because City won the League Cup.
Well, unless somehow City falls out of the top 6 somehow, I guess. Is that how it works?
Yeah, that's true, which I think is still mathematically possible. Yes, it's certainly mathematically possible, but that's
highly unlikely.
We'll say. Ridiculous. Let's say that. I mean, they have 2 games in hand on Arsenal and Liverpool. That's presumably the only reason they're in 4th. Mm-hmm. And they have 3 games in hand on Chelsea. So, Man City will be first if they win all of their games in hand. That's where it is. But currently on points, they're sitting in 4th. I don't know. United has been a very schizophrenic team. I mean, starting with the very first day of the season on NBC, they played Swansea. They beat Swansea like 4-1. They could have won that game 10-1. I mean, they were brilliant except for their finishing that day. And I thought, hey, this Moyes era is going to go off well, picking up where they left off. But that was clearly not the case. I mean, lots of turnover. Vidic is going. I mean, I guess he's more or less gone. I mean, I think Moyes is pretty much settled with Evans and Smalling in the middle. Liverpool has their own set of defensive problems, but going forward, 2 of their players at least have been fantastic. So, do you think that the either Creaky or Young, I don't know which one will end up playing, but one of those 2 sets of defensive pairings will play for United tomorrow. Will they be able to handle Suarez and Sturridge?
Based on form and ability, I would say no. But Liverpool they're a different team on the road this season. Their home record is outstanding, but their away record is compared to their home record and their true form of beating, Tottenham 5-0, which was actually on the road. But they have the potential to win every game on the road, I believe, and they just sometimes don't show up on the road for one reason or another. So I don't really know how it's going to be.
So that 5-0 performance, that was the one right before AVB got sacked, correct? Is that a
Uh,
different?
it was before he got sacked. I don't know if it was a week or two before he got
Yeah, I
sacked, though.
remember Nathan, who has made some very brief appearances on the show. He made some comments about the Michigan Gridiron team. That might be, he may have been the Michigan Gridiron correspondent. I got a couple quotes for him. Um, but he was saying, he came over for that game, and he was saying AVB is not going to make it to the end of the week. And then a couple of days later, he was like, "See, told you," because I didn't believe it. I was not convinced that 1-5-0 loss was enough for a team that was in at the time like third or something. But yeah, they weren't happy. I'm not so certain that, I mean, when Tottenham switched managers, there was a bump, but I'm not sure they're really any better off at this point. I mean, they're in fifth place. They're still going in the Europa League, but on Thursday when they played Benfica in what I believe is the quarterfinals, they did not look like a team that wanted to be in the Europa League. Either that or Benfica is just much better than Tottenham, because Tottenham ended up losing 3-1, and it could have been much worse. In fact, the one was just a brilliant free kick goal from Eriksson, but otherwise Tottenham didn't look like they were. And Lloris looked like he had not recovered from the concussion. And he just his decision making was terrible. I mean, he was just like running out to get the ball, and then the ball would bounce over his head, and it was just like. It was comical almost. I mean, but it was like watching a car crash in slow motion. I mean, it was just terrible. So,
Well, I
I
will
don't know how
say
they're gonna deal with Arsenal. So,
I will say that Benfica, at least in the past few years, has really given the Europa League a good show. I think that they value it a lot more than probably the English Premier League teams do.
now you say that, but Chelsea won the Europa League last
Right,
year.
but at least Benfica was there at the final. I mean,
Yeah,
I don't think the EPL teams care about it until they're in the final.
fair enough. So next weekend we have Chelsea v Arsenal.
Hmm.
That is another top of the table, more or less clash. And we also have, now it's a Tuesday game, but we also have the Manchester Derby. I don't necessarily have anything to say about either of those games other than, oh my God, I hope United decides to play defense.
They are at Old Trafford, so who knows?
Yeah, I mean, this year, though, that hasn't meant a
That hasn't
lot.
mean anything.
No, I mean, we've got some Josie Watch games on the schedule, and then Arsenal plays City before our next. Well, actually, it'll technically be after our next football recording, but it'll be the same day as our next recording on March 29th. And so I don't know if there's any of the other games that you want to say anything about in preview before that we move on to the MLS.
No, I'll just sit and wait and see what happens.
Yeah, so if anything particularly interesting happens, we will discuss on 29th. So MLS, before we get to MLS proper, I just want to say that so far in the CONCACAF Champions League, MLS teams have looked good. Sporting KC and LA Galaxy both won in their first round of matches. So there's not a coefficient to worry about in that. Like the MLS just gets a certain amount of slots, Mexico gets a certain amount of slots, and then there may be a coefficient for the other countries. I don't know how that works, but I don't think the MLS has to worry, about those teams winning or losing. It doesn't really help them. Now, the longer those teams stay in the CCL, that helps the other MLS teams just from a squad rotation basis, because those teams will be rotating the Donovans and the Zuzis of the world. Of course, those players are going to be out for the World Cup, which is something that we'll have to talk about at some point. One thing, though, that we did, and I don't know how far that you got in this, so this will be me hearing it for the first time as well, but we sort of did the FIFA prediction, the FIFA EA Sports prediction MLS style. So why don't you tell me, because I'm curious what you found. I've got, basically what happened with mine in the show notes, so people can read that if we don't get through all of that. But I want to hear what happened in your go at it.
Okay. Well, I decided to do the Sounders. I mean, not the Sounders. Sporting KC. And I did not allow transfers the first year, so it was as the crews currently were. I did get the current rosters. So I got the current rosters, went through no transfer window just to see what would happen. And I'm seeing a lot of the same things that you had. I mean, I can talk about how I tried to play with Sporting KC, but I don't think that that's the most relevant. I did also have Toronto SE winning the East at 78 points. After simming, Sporting KC tied for fifth with 51 points. And this is a question that I'll have for you: is they tied for fifth, I had the goal differential. So we both had 51 points. The Sporting KC and the Houston Dynamo both had 51 points. My goal differential was +5. Dynamo's was +4. They got into the playoffs. I didn't. Or Sporting KC didn't.
Yeah, I would have thought goal differential was the tiebreaker. I'm almost certain that's actually the case, but it may be that head-to-head is the tiebreaker.
It could have been. I did kind of rig the last game to make sure that I could win and at least have a chance to tie them. But I made sure I had the goal differential, and it still wasn't enough.
So did you get fired? I'm just curious.
I did not get fired.
Okay.
But I did not reach my the goal that they had set for me.
Yeah. Neither did I on mine with DC United, and TFC had 75 points. And was there quite the gap, because TFC won the East by 20 points in my sense.
Yeah, I think they won it by like 14. Sorry, Columbus Crew came in at 64 on mine.
Sporting KC are the reigning MLS Cup champs. In mine, they came in second to bottom in the East, which doesn't make any sense. They didn't lose any big name players. FIFA doesn't, or the EA FIFA game doesn't have the same playing during the World Cup. And anyway, this was actually the 2013 sim that we did. Even though it was the current rosters, the way they do it is, it was 2013. So there was no World Cup in the middle. Mm-hmm. But, I mean, that's just ridiculous that Sporting KC would fall so far and that TFC would rise so far. I mean, TFC has never made the playoffs. Now, granted, they've made a lot of huge moves, but as we saw with Dempsey last year and as we saw with Beckham and Henry before that, big-name stars often take a while to adjust to the MLS. Mm-hmm. It's just that the travel, it's like playing in Europe, in the Europa League and UEFA Champions League, like all the time. That's the kind of travel. And it's actually a little bit worse than that, because you're generally, at least in Champions League, not heading up to Russia and, Eastern Europe all that much. But that's really what the travel distances we're talking about, with two teams in LA, a team in San Jose, Seattle, Portland. Those are all West Coast teams. And then we have DC, New York, New England, all on the East Coast. Now, for the Central teams, they don't have quite as much travel, but still, it's a lot of travel.
Mm-hmm. It is a lot of travel. I will also take note that, Toronto's goal differential was 45. They had 66 goals scored and let in only 21. That seemed a bit much. I mean, maybe not on the goal score side, but a goal differential of 45 just seems like a lot for an MLS team. Galaxy came in second in that conversation with 30, a goal differential of 30. They had 60 goals, let in 30. Toronto SC was the manager of the year. Gilberto was my player of the year. He had the most goals. I think he had 24, and I see that he also had the most goals on your MLS season. It looks like he had 20 for you. Other similar names that we had, I also had Wright Phillips. He was in second, and I also had Castillo. He was in fifth. Now, Kane finished third, and Saborio finished fourth. I do not have record of what those numbers actually were, but I do remember Gilberto's was 24.
Nice. So I'm trying to see if there's anything else before we want to move on. I don't believe there's really anything else we need to say about that. We did have a couple other MLS things to discuss. One of them being that the MLS has caught Major League Baseball as it pertains to kids. Now, there's been various polls like this coming out for some time, but this is a new one that has just come out.
This was on the range of 12 to 17-year-olds.
Okay.
And I think it was how I don't remember the word that they used. It was how engaged or do you follow or care about these leagues, and the MLS had caught the Major League Baseball, which I think is it, important to note. I clearly don't know if this statistical study was accurate or not. Did they skew the data in some way? But I would like to believe that I could trust them. But the fact that the Major League Soccer in America has caught in popularity with the young age with baseball is something that I believe the MLS and U.S. Soccer has been going for. Is we need to raise the popularity at the young age, get the younger people invested, so that when they become older, soccer will have really taken off. Get the young people invested when it comes to playing the sport, so when they get of age in the 20s, they'll be playing in the MLS, they'll be playing for the U.S. men's national team instead of playing for, the NBA or Major League Baseball.
Indeed. So they're taking the cigarette company approach to things. They just need Joe Camel. So. Let's move very briefly on to MLS Fantasy before we wrap this up. I just have a question for you. After I did this knowing that it could turn into be a disaster last year, and I was right about it being the disaster, I picked up Dempsey when he came into the league thinking that, well, maybe he'll catch fire and he'll go up in value, and then I'll hate myself for having not done it. Bradley this year, a lot of people are going to probably want to pick him up because there's been a lot of media about him. Do you think people should pick him up in the fantasy league, or do you think that people should wait?
I would say wait. I mean, just based on what I've seen, I didn't play him on my team, and I ended up somehow with the highest points. I think I just happened to play forwards that were on, goal scoring form that week.
You beat your opponent, but
I thought I had the most points in there too. I thought I had 51, which was the most.
Oh, maybe the last time I looked at it was before the final game. So I will double check that.
I think I had 51, which I believe was the most. I think most other people were in the 40s. I did not have Bradley. I think that they tend to overprice players like that at the beginning just because people are going to want to pick them up, make them popular, so they're going to, put a hefty price tag on him. So I would wait. I would think that it would dip down a little bit before taking stock up, going up, just because I don't think he's going to come in immediately and start putting up, goals and assists and defending like crazy. But he may. I just think that there will be kind of a dip in price for Bradley first, and then his form will start picking up, and he'll start gaining his value back. So I would wait until, kind of like the stock market, buy low, sell high.
So this is interesting because the last time that I looked at it, a bunch of people had 49, and apparently the people, or at least a couple people, had 49, and the people that had 49 seem to have lost points. So yeah, I was I thought I had looked at it after the last game, which last week was Chivas Chicago, and either that was not actually the last game of the week, or they just hadn't calculated that game yet. So I ended up being second in points, and you were number one in points. So yeah, and you must have beaten DCU for life. Yeah, so DCU for life SC had 48 points, which was the second most points, tied with me, and Rhino actually had 48 as well. But since you had 51, you beat them. So people should be able to tell by our discussion that we're doing a head-to-head round this week. Some people like that. I'm not sure if I'm like it yet or not, but we'll see how it goes.
I think it goes to I'm not sure how to put it, but basically you can have one person run away with it with 1 week. If you don't do a head-to-head, say you do like a group, they could just score a ton of points, and that puts them in the lead for like 3 or 4 weeks, and you got to have strong weeks to catch up. Where here, if they have a strong week, that's only a win, It doesn't mean as much. So for those people who are going to get those strong, really strong weeks, they're like, oh man, that's only one win. Next week I may lose, but everybody else behind him say, oh well, now we can catch them.
Yeah. So I don't know. I don't think over the course of the MLS season it's going to be that big of a deal. I mean, there's more than 12 game weeks. I mean, a lot of the NFL fantasy leagues they're like 12 games, right? Because they want to end before teams stop playing all their players.
Well, or they do the playoffs after the season. So weeks 13, 14, 15, and 16, or weeks 13. No, weeks 14 and 15 are like round one, and then weeks 16 and 17 are the finals usually when they do the playoffs like that.
Yeah, so 13 NFL weeks and then the playoffs, right?
If they do the playoffs like that.
Yeah. So I think this is going to be quite a bit different. Now, I think the way that they do it, I mean, this is the way they've got the table, is that it will be wins and then it will be points. So if you and I, for example, we can't win all of our matches. Let's say we split. I don't know if we'll play each other twice, but we split our series and we win all of our other matches. Let's just say that theoretically. Whoever has the most points will be the winner. I think that's the way that they're doing it. But it's week 1 right now, so it's hard to know how that's all going to fall out. So I will say that I am mostly doing Wendy's team, so I'm playing her this week. So if I lose, I'm losing to myself. I just want that to be entirely clear. Now, the one thing that I told her that I wouldn't do is she has Bocanegra as her captain. Chivas gave up 2 goals in their first game. Now, they ended up winning 3-2. But unless you're going to have a rock-solid D, having a defender as your captain, I think, is a recipe for disaster. But, basically I didn't tell her she shouldn't do that because I was like, well, it's too early to know. Maybe Chicago is just, going to have a great offense this year.
Yeah.
So
I did the dangerous thing and made the goalkeeper the captain.
Who's your goalkeeper?
I don't even remember now. Oh gosh, I know his last name starts with a K, but I cannot remember. I think he plays for like the FC Dallas.
Dan Kennedy. He plays for Chivas.
Chivas, okay. Yeah, so I was just like, yeah, why not? And he scored 4 points, which I guess doubled to 8.
Yeah.
So, not a bad decision. I mean, I could have made a better decision in hindsight, but who knows?
Yeah, true. All right, so I'm going to leave the link in here for the World Cup predictor. We'll have plenty of time before the World Cup to poke people and prod people into joining that, and then we'll discuss those just like we were discussing the MLS Fantasy League. Do you have anything else that you want to say before we get out of here, Evan?
That's a pretty good show this week. Lots of talk EPL and MLS. Went, a little long, but that's to be expected.
Yeah, that's fine. And we will see everyone again on Wednesday at 4:30 U.S. Eastern. But for now, this has been TINT, the premier free culture sports podcast. And that is...